we're one of the largest Amazon partners, which is the most difficult B2B channel in the world. So target marketplace, that is a marketplace that's a whole different infrastructure, like an Amazon or a Walmart marketplace. What sort of customization can they do? Or a large infrastructure in the space. So we see a lot of stuff. I see a lot of data. I talk to a lot of brands. And can they make sure and be held accountable to be able to deliver this OTIF when they need to or when the retailers are asking for it? Now, what makes this so difficult and what brands traditionally get wrong is that the reason that this podcast actually sprung out the inspiration for me was that we were recently in a massive, what's called an RFQ. Now, if you don't know what that means, it basically means ready for quote. It's in a business jargon word that, hey, we have a big merchant traditionally, and they're going to float out the requirements, and they want a bunch of warehouses to come bid on it. And this works in every industry, but for us, it's called an RFQ or an RFP, which is a ready for proposal. So we were speaking to this global brand. It was it's a toothpaste brand. There's not many of them. You can probably go backwards pretty quickly. And obviously, they're, multi-billion-dollar revenue. They're in every retailer, literally on planet Earth. And they were exploring a new partner, and AMZ Prep was in the vendor mix for B2B and D2C. And there's a little bit of Amazon sprinkled on top. And the challenge in what posed was super interesting because the way that they thought about their D2C was actually really interesting in relativity to their B2B. And I want to be breaking down some of the thought-provoking questions I asked them, along with some of the key factors that I would encourage you to think about when you're looking for a B2B partner, because it can be different than when you're thinking about D2C, because the playing field's a little bit different. The partners are different. Do you need 2 facilities? Do you need 1? Do you need different partners? I want to be breaking down some of my thoughts and what I'm seeing just based off hundreds of conversations about having this. Now, just quick definitions, because I can throw a lot of jargon around. FBA, D2C, B2B. FBA means fulfillment by Amazon. D2C means direct to consumer, and then you have B2B, which means like a business to business. FBA, you're shipping to Amazon. Amazon's fulfilling it. There's also like FBM, but I just look at Amazon as like a one core product. D2C means like a literally direct to consumer order. This is where a lot of 3PLs operate in logistics as they fulfill end customer orders. And then you have B2B. Traditionally, what B2B 3PLs and logistics looks like is pallet in, pallet out, case level, but it is a lot more difficult than that. A lot of merchants just think, hey, it's just a case level version of my e-com orders. It is so much more difficult than that. And so traditionally, when we think about B2B, these are orders that are actually going to retailers. This might be drop ship, and it's a very specific compliance and routing and all the things that you have to be covering. And so I want to be breaking down some of these definitions, but also the key factors that you need to keep in mind. Now, just one layer deeper inside the B2B matrix is we have B2B retail orders, and then we have what we call drop ship orders. So if you're a brand and you're partnering with, let's just say Target, right? So there's Target in-store and then there's Target Marketplace. Let's not get those mixed up. So Target Marketplace, that is a marketplace. That's a whole different infrastructure, like an Amazon or a Walmart marketplace. There's Target in-store and then there's Target dropship. So Target in-store means that you probably went to a Target. They actually made an official purchase order from you, and Target's going to buy it. You're going to ship to Target distribution centers, and they will put it on their shelves and then, ship it to the end customers. Midday Square's great example that we work with that, they're shipping directly into Target. Now there's a second called Target Dropship. And traditionally this might be for catalog that isn't performing or they don't have data on, or for whatever reason, it just doesn't make sense for them to cut POs in the store, but they still want it. But they maybe only want it on their online store. It might be a part of their marketplace, but it's sold by Target. And so what happens in that instance is that Target buys on demand. So you need to fulfill it, or you have a 3PL fulfill it. And then as an order comes in, customer orders off Target. Target then on demand buys the order. They'll traditionally spit you out a shipping label, right? So they probably have their own carrier contract. Some don't, some do, depends on the retailer. And then they will deliver that label plus the order to your facility. And on the back end, you're actually getting paid on that physical order, but you are expected, or your 3PL is expected to pick it, pack it, and then ship it out. So 2 different things you have to keep in mind. There's a drop ship and then an in-store. Now, what makes this so difficult and what brands traditionally get wrong is that the B2B world is incredibly complex. Just for some vetting bases, we're one of the largest Amazon partners, which is the most difficult B2B channel in the world. We're talking about Amazon 1P, which is their vendor portal, their 3P business. And so that's where AMZ Prep initially started. And then as we grew, we evolved into B2B, retailers, e-com, and all the other pieces that make up what is our omnichannel logistics infrastructure. But we're shipping tens of millions of dollars of orders into the Walmarts, the Targets. We're doing drop ship for the Home Depots and the Loblaws and the Lowe's. And so we do this a lot. That is my credentials. We're a large infrastructure in the space. So we see a lot of stuff. I see a lot of data. I talk to a lot of brands. Now, key factors you need to be able to keep in mind is that most 3PLs cannot do B2B, right? Maybe they can do a little bit of Amazon, and even then they drop the ball, but they cannot do B2B. Some of the things that you need to be thinking about inside of a B2B partner is as listed. Number one is everything about routing guides. So majority of retailers, especially when you're shipping in store, have routing guides, very specific guides of how you handle the orders, whether it's the way the label's stamped, the way that you're packing out. There's also a thing called in-store displays. So if you think of something at like Costco, or it's called an end shelf, right? Or an end cap, they're like the custom pallets that have to get built. Much like CPG brands do it. You've probably seen them around. And so there's end caps, there's compliance, there's routing details. These are all the most critical compliance checks and balances that you need to be covering. And I would challenge that majority of warehouses do not fully understand this. Will they listen to you? Yes, they will. But as a brand, as an operator, as a founder, you might also not be fully in tune with their compliance guides because they change, and they change often. Also, the way you ship in from a compliance perspective. And the most gruesome part of this is that the retailers have full control to be able to give you chargebacks. And so we've seen multi-million-dollar chargebacks for these large brands because they just can't either ship in right, they're missing routing documents, they're not following proper compliance procedures, they are not doing the checks and balances because the warehouse isn't able to, they don't know how to, and because of that, there's a huge cost factor. We fulfill for one of the largest host companies in the world, and they were getting close to $1 million a month in chargebacks. $1 million, right? Now, granted, they're doing, tens of millions on a monthly basis, but still 3, 5, 10% of your revenue is coming into chargebacks really hits you. And it's because their warehouse wasn't able to figure out the routing guides for Amazon 1P. So this happens quite often. And is usually the biggest downfall or the questions that we're asking with brands about, okay, what routing guides do you have? How are you intaking the data and so forth? This happens for in-store, and this also can happen for dropship. Number 2 is technology. Now, B2B requires a whole different infrastructure in place. So when we think about B2B, some of the questions that we're asking is things like, what kind of technology are you currently using? What's your ERP? Right? What are you using to integrate to the retailer channels? So I'll give you a quick example. Some merchants will be using what's called an ERP. This is basically your central hub for data, right? Think of a NetSuite, but there's some new players like DOS and Luminous and so forth that are basically the consolidation hub of data. They control finance, inventory, and they become the ledger of data basically for these larger businesses. Most brands evolve to get there. Usually at a $5 to $10 million plus is when you start looking at an ERP. So what kind of ERP are they using, or SAP, right? That could be another option. Secondly is from how are they connecting to the retailers? So the two big players, for example, one's called Commerce Hub, right? And then one's called SPS. Now, they have very specific goals in place, but traditionally you can't just connect directly to Walmart or directly to a Target. You have to go through one of these channel integrators because they made it a lot easier. So the brand will pay for a Commerce Hub or an SPS, whatever it is, and we will integrate directly there. So we'll plug into an SPS Commerce, and then all the orders drop through that. That could be their dropship orders, and it could also be the in-store orders. But, most companies don't even think about the integration part, and that is the biggest nuisance. Like, you cannot do this manually. There's just too much data going back and forth. And so a lot of these operations also happen in the EDI world, right? So some of it's API, like webhooks, but EDI is a much deeper, or these are like FTP files. This is very niche logistics stuff. You don't need to get into it. The key is that there's current technology that the warehouse needs to be able to integrate to the technology you run and your entire tech stack. The WMS to the OMS to the ERP. There's a lot of lingo here. It's a little bit intimidating, but if you have a retail channel like a Target, you'll need an SPS Commerce or a Commerce Hub. Probably connects to your internal ERP. If you don't have one, that's fine. You'll get it. And then from there, that's actually pushing to RWMS. Any piece of that breaks, there's a huge challenge. And this is a big lift, right? So we have a whole technology team that builds this, designs it, creates the workflows, because there's also usually e-com orders, there's Amazon orders, there's the B2B, and you also have to prioritize orders, right? There's a synchronization, there's an orchestration of, Walmart is prioritized over your e-com orders or Amazon over X, right? If Target wants a rush order, retail always gets prioritization traditionally for a lot of these brands. So how do you create that tier system to be able to think about it? We're just taking on this new jewelry brand, and they sell nationwide in retailers. They're using some multi-channel fulfillment. They do Amazon FBA. They do TikTok. They're now stepping into in-store and dropship. So they are a true omnichannel. And what they need is a lot different than what we would build for like a traditional e-com merchant or Amazon, where literally it's just a plug and play. We built these integrations, but it's a key factor you have to keep in mind. Fewer things is number one is the SLA performance. So one of the key factors with B2B is that there's key SLAs you have to be able to put in. So things like pushing an ASN or routing number. These are certain breaches that need to get done within 24, 48, 36 hours. And so for example, with Amazon 1P, which is their vendor central program, you have a certain threshold from the time the order drops on Monday to approving the purchase order, and then also pushing all the data back, meaning it got picked, it got packed, and it got picked up, along with an appointment time getting into Amazon. So these are all fundamentals that if the warehouse isn't aware, right, of those times and cutoffs, same with Walmart, same with every other major retailer, if you miss any of those for whatever reason, chargeback, and then chargeback again. If you use a non-compliant freight partner that didn't get the appointment, or you missed your window for Costco, again, chargebacks. If it's a CPG brand, they may need a reefer truck. If not, chargeback, right? So it is a very slippery slope, but the key is understanding, hey, what are the SLAs? What's the current routing book, right? It's called a routing guide is the key questions to ask for the 3PL or the brand. Like, what's your routing guide on SLAs? And then how is all this technology going to talk to each other? My two other notes is one, retail experience. So understanding their capabilities from, if you're speaking to a 3PL about the Walmarts, the Targets, the Costcos, and then also some of the smaller retailers like Affair, local mom and pops, right? What sort of customization can they do? Do they understand the needs of those? There's also a thing called consolidation pools. So what we do for Amazon and what we do for Walmart, we have consolidation hubs across the country. And so one of their partners, and there's certain SLAs that have to get met, but we can consolidate a bunch of different brands to piggyback our trucks. It's what we call the middle mile. So we do a ton on Amazon. Now we're doing a lot more inside of the Walmart world, and we're doing load consolidation for these merchants, right? Understanding, can they do kitting? So we do a bunch of Costco prep now where we're creating end caps and certain multi-packs and subscription boxes and all these other things for retailers. And because of that, there's a very specific SOP that needs to get followed, along with what carriers, what pallet, you need a ship pallet for Costco, like very technical stuff. Understand what retailers have done, speak to their brands that have done it with them in the past, quiz them about their integrations based off those specific channel, and then if they already have routing guides built. Most of our merchants, we're building these like custom SOPs for all the routing guides and compliance because it's just so damn technical, and each merchant might be a little bit different. And if there's in-store and dropship, it just creates even a more layer of complexity. But from retail, from Home Depot to Target to Walmart, make sure they have checks and balances on all sides. Lastly is scalability and seasonal surges, right? So can they handle, peak orders, or if there's an in-demand drop ship where Target wants to pre-order, 6 months worth of inventory, which happens, and they'll negotiate better rates. Can they handle that? Just questions you need to be able to keep in mind. One of the most popular questions here we get is like, do you actually need a different partner for D2C, B2B? I think it absolutely depends. I think the biggest challenge is that if you're expanding to retail, this is a massive opportunity for you to really show the retailers what you're able to do. Now, we always push for merchants to stay on Amazon and e-commerce before they break into the B2B world. But say you're ready for that. The key is making sure that you have the right B2B prep partner that can handle this. So we see it quite often where a merchant might actually keep the 3PL, like their D2C operations with another company, but they move the Amazon plus the B2B over to us. We can do the e-commerce. We do an absolute ton of it. But for whatever reason, they might be tied. They might already have a good workflow. But the retailer stuff they send to us, and they also send us all the Amazon because it's just compliance work at the end of the day. Compliance is king, right? Like we're moving a box. That's not the difficult part, or moving a pallet. It's the compliance and the technology that we've built to make sure that we have these checks and balances. And we have teams trained on each warehouse specifically for basically each retailer, each channel that we're fulfilling through. So something you really got to keep in mind. Can you get away with it with one warehouse? Maybe. But I would really challenge and understand the capabilities on the B2B. I had a great call with a massive supplement brand, very big on Facebook and TikTok. And, the conversation was basically around, I started talking about our D2C and I said, this is what we can do. These are our facilities. And he said, stop. This is their VP of ops. He said, Blair, stop. I really don't care about your D2C operations. And I was appalled. And he said, walk me through how you handle your Amazon prep process. Walk me through, we're now expanding to Costco. What does that process look like? Explain to me how you handle end caps. What is your routing guide process for Costco? Do you do load consolidation? Talk me through another brand and their technology stack of handling this. They're like, D2C, anyone can handle that for us. We are not concerned about D2C. You're picking and packing and we make it very, very easy. Tell me about the hard stuff. Tell me about the ugly business and how do you handle that? And I thought it was such a refreshing perspective because I do agree, right? Like B2B is going to be the most challenged, whether it's an Amazon or a Walmart. And if you can nail that, the rest are cakewalks. But ask those questions, ask the hard ones, because if they wow you with D2C, they might not be able to prioritize B2B. If you have small retailers, I would not be as fussed. Small retailers are easy, right? It's the ones that have certain routing guides and compliance to ship it in, whether it's packaging or the drop ship requirements. If it's a small retailer and they're just emailing you the orders, whatever, it's fine. Your 3PL can do it. It's fine. But there might be cost efficiencies. There'll be compliance improvements and chargebacks. And there's also a level of this tailored expertise if you have the volume to justify it. Or on top of that, like most warehouses can't do end caps and so forth, like very niche Costco and Walmart prep stuff. And so if they can't do that, you might actually be forced function to use a secondary warehouse. But just know that's going to add a layer of cost, it's going to layer complexity, but trade-off could be chargebacks, expertise, speed, just factors that we can talk about together. So when I'm looking at a 3PL invoice and you're evaluating for B2B, just keep in mind the pricing is going to be a little bit different, right? So traditionally, it could be a pallet in, pallet out rate, right? It could be a case fee. Plus, there could be an additional labeling fee depending on like the compliance. And some retailers need 2 labels versus 1, and how they're packaging it. But it's usually like a case pick level or a pallet pick level, along with pallet labels that are going. They might have integration fees if they need to connect with the retailers of the world and SPS commerce. There might be a major first lift, and there might be ongoing. Most of the time, we don't have to charge for it. But if it's like a custom ERP we've never done, sometimes we have tech fees or we have to utilize our resources to do it. It doesn't happen often, but keep that in mind. And also hitting cost. Like if you can understand freight costs now, also what happens if there's chargebacks, right? Can they commit to holding accountability to themselves? What happens if you get a $100,000 fee because you mispackaged and mislabeled, you put the label here and it's supposed to go here, right? Or you didn't hit the delivery appointment even though they were using the trucks. These are questions you're going to have to ask, and the hard stuff, before you actually give them over your B2B business, which I would argue is the most important, call it staple of the business. It might not be the biggest, but it's going to be the most important from retailer relationship and showing, future order state. A couple red flags I would look out for. Do they have a B2B compliance team and really quiz them on the retail expectation? Can they connect their direct technologies and do they drive that conversation with SPS, Commerce Hub, ERP? Are they using these words? Do they understand the flow, or are they built for an e-commerce operation? And understanding, can they do both, right? This is going to be a big part of it. Overpromising on OTIF, right? On-time fulfillment. At the end of the day, are they overpromising this? What's their actual metrics? Do they have data to back this? And can they make sure and be held accountable to be able to deliver this OTIF when they need to and when the retailers are asking for it? And do they have any other special programs specifically around retailers, like how we do for Walmart and Amazon, what we call load consolidation, inventory pools, how we send consolidated freight to those retailers? All things we have to keep in mind. My last thing is 5 tactical questions that I would ask, a 3PL, or if you're looking at AMZ Prep, questions I would ask, our sales guys, what exactly to make sure that we'd be an incredible fit on the B2B side. So the 5 questions are: number 1, how do you handle routing guides for these major retailers? And can you walk me through a few examples of how you do this? 1, can you tell me your on-time fulfillment rate specifically for B2B? And can you show some examples or merchants? And maybe there's a reference you can actually get on how you're doing it for what channels. What systems do you integrate with? B2B, what systems do you integrate on the B2B side? SPS Commerce, SAP, the ERP, B2B, every word and lingo that you need. How do you integrate? How does that data flow? And walk us through what that journey would look like. Can you walk us through how you scaled a merchant on the B2B side? What retailers from volume X to volume Y? Walk us through some of the challenges that you faced. Number 5, where did your team see the most hidden costs when working with brands on the B2B side? And how can you help us avoid it? right? Really trying to get into the crux of, not every logistics company is perfect. There's always going to be issues. It's the logistics. We're moving product. It happens. What are some of the major learnings that they took away? Can you help apply that to your business? So that is my takeaway. I think the core theme of this is that we were in an incredible conversation with a B2B partner, and they decided at the end of that meeting that they're actually going to keep all of their B2B with their e-com partner. And this was just a few months ago. I was actually highly against it because I understood who that 3PL was. They're very popular technology-led 3PL that you probably know very well. And they over-talked from what they can do from a B2B, specifically dropship, kitting, it's high volume prep work, everything that we would be incredible for. We even showed them one of our facilities, but they decided for the simplicity of their operations, they're going to keep it with their D2C 3PL. And in some instances, I would be fine, but at the size and scale of what they're doing, these chargebacks could be massive, and I would challenge that the team didn't have full capabilities there. Unfortunately, they still decided to do it, but I think what came from that is a great rant session and a bit of learnings on the technicalities of B2B. And I think what you can hopefully apply if you're working for a brand, if you own a brand, and as you think about retailer, how do you think about the logistics piece to keep your brand alive and also crushing it on these retail channels? That's it for my rant today. If you like this and want more, let me know. Drop your comments down below. Thanks.